Okay, thank you very much. So once again, welcome back to the Xeno Basics Season 2, Week 5. Today we're going to be talking about how vegan balance oil can help support normal brain and heart functions, especially for vegetarians and vegans. So here is today's rundown. First of all, I'll talk about whether vegetarians and vegans actually lead a healthier life. And I'll talk about the possible potential risks that they have in terms of nutrition, of course. And then we will discuss whether they really need to take EPA and DHA. And finally, I will introduce you to this amazing products, vegan balance oil. And then finally, I'll share some of the findings that I didn't discover them, but I'm going to be sharing some research findings in my own research with you. So let's get started. So first of all, are vegetarians really healthier? I'm sure a lot of people have their own versions of their answers to this question. I'm not going to answer that for you because it depends on a lot of different factors, as we will see later. But I'd like to start tonight's webinar with this quote, which I find really interesting and inspiring as well. So it's from Paul McCartney, and he said, if slaughterhouses had glass walls, everyone would be a vegetarian. And obviously he is an animal activist. But then what I'd really like to highlight is there are various reasons for people to be vegetarian or vegan. So at the end of the day, it really comes down to a matter of personal choice. Some people choose to become vegetarian for religious or spiritual reasons. Some become vegetarian because they love the environment, when they know the impact of for example, the cattle industry on the world, global warming and those effects. And then some people choose to be vegan because they believe it's healthier for them. And there is no denying that there are definite benefits to be gained from eating more vegetables and fruits if you are vegetarian and vegan. But then it also exposes you to more risks in terms of nutrient deficiencies. And it's the same with any other restricted diets anyway. It's not just vegetarian and vegan. My personal experience with vegetarianism and veganism, and actually many other restricted diets. I've been many things. I've been vegan before. I've been keto vegan. I've been vegetarian, ovo-lacto vegetarian, pescatarian, etc. And well, from my own experience, I would definitely say it really is a matter of personal choice. I chose not to eat meat because I did not want to. Not that but there are people who say that they don't like the taste of meat. It's very personal, of course. I actually liked it, but I chose not to eat it because I liked animals. But then my perspectives changed as well. So at the moment, I'm not completely vegan. I follow a cyclical diet. So just to make sure that I don't have nutritional deficiencies. But then tonight is not about me. It's about vegan balance oil. So we'll talk more about that now. So the biggest problem with, well, I wouldn't say it's a problem. Well, it's a potential problem. The potential problem with vegetarianism and veganism really is about the protein. So the first thing that usually comes to mind when someone tells you he or she is vegan or vegetarian is, then where do you get your protein from? Well, one of the most popular sources of plant-based proteins is, of course, soy products. Well, we have tofu here, we've got soybeans, we've got edamame, we've got soy milk, and of course, these are fermented soy products. I don't know if you are familiar with them. They are quite popular in the wellness community, and also, well, they come from Asia, for example. These are called tempeh. They are fermented soybeans from Indonesia, I believe. And then these are natto, fermented soybeans, again, from Japan. And some people are starting to call these superfoods because, for example, natto is really rich in vitamin K, and basically they say there's some research that shows that if you eat K2, the vitamin K in natto is really good at lowering or clearing your blood vessels. But the reason why I'd like to talk about plant-based protein is, and since soy is the number one plant-based protein, the problem with it is it's very high in omega-6 fatty acids. If you remember from our last season, we talked about this trend starting in the 1960s, with this surge in omega-6 fatty acid consumption, especially in soy products and soy oil. And if you remember, omega-6 is a pro-inflammatory oil, which means it causes inflammation in your body, and a lot of what we call modern diseases or diseases of civilization actually are caused by chronic low-grade inflammation in our body. We'll talk more about that later tonight. And there's one more thing about soy products. They are high in phytoestrogen, which have been linked to certain cancers, and they could be problems for certain populations. Because it's basically a hormone, but of a plant source. But we're not going to talk so much about that. At the end of the day, once again, our take-home message is the key is balance, just like balanced oil. So now that we know the major source of protein is soy, and soy is high in omega-6, so it's quite natural for us to think or to question whether people who are eating or who are following a vegetarian diet are actually healthy, because since they're eating so much omega-6 fatty acids. Well, according to this study conducted by Zhejiang University in China and Harvard Medical School, it turns out that you're right. If you had that, question, people who are vegetarian actually do have a much higher omega-6 fatty acid profile in their blood, and they also have more inflammatory markers in their blood as well. And well, we've just talked about that chronic inflammation is one of the main causes of diseases of civilization. So it is natural for us to think that, well, these people might not be as healthy as they'd like to think they are. Well, if you look at this picture here, inflammation or low-grade chronic inflammation is associated with a lot of these diseases or disorders. So, and this is not the end of the story yet. Is vegetarian food really healthy? Well, if you ask me, or if you've ever been to East Asia, for example, to Hong Kong, to Taiwan, to China, mainland China, or Korea, or Japan, actually, you find a lot of vegetarian restaurants that serve a lot of deep fried food. Even for more Western vegetarian restaurants, they also serve a lot of burgers which are deep fried or pan fried. So they actually go through high heat process. They go through a high heat process, which could cause a lot of problems. And the problem with deep fried food is they are very high in trans fats. Asia is still quite behind in terms of trans fats. There are many states in the US that have already banned the use of trans fats in restaurants. But in Asia, it's still a common fat that you find in restaurants because it's very cheap. It can be produced really cheaply industrially. And a lot of these foods are also highly processed because I don't know why. East Asian vegetarians seem to like mock meat a lot, which is also why, in the past couple of years, there is this surging interest in plant-based protein, and it's really taking Asia. I mean, people in Asia are really crazy about that because there's vegan luncheon meat, vegan burger, and but they're all plant-based protein. I am not a big fan. I'm not a fan of these things because they are highly processed, and a lot of them contain soy or even gluten, and they have a lot of additives that you can't even pronounce. So my advice is go for whole foods if you want to be vegetarian or vegan. That is a sure way to be healthy because whole foods really are what foods are meant to be. They are what nature intended them to be. So if you want to be vegetarian, just eat vegetables and fruits. So now that we know that vegetarian food isn't necessarily healthier, then what about the people who eat them? We know that they are limiting themselves in terms of certain food groups. Well, for example, they don't eat animal products. Does that mean that they will be more at risk for certain deficiencies? Since tonight is about balanced oil, we'll be mainly focusing on EPA and DHA. And you're right, they actually have much lower levels of EPA and DHA. We'll see more data later. But why is that? Well, first and foremost, because their intake is much lower because DHA and EPA are primarily found in fish and oily fish. And there are people who will come out and say, oh, well, I eat a lot of seaweed. Well, you're right about seaweed or algae containing DHA and EPA. In fact, algae produce DHA and EPA, but then the seaweed that you find on the market does not contain a very high fat content. They have a really low fat content, so you cannot rely on seaweed as your source of EPA and DHA. And then one more important issue with the vegetarians is that some of them or many of them argue that they can also have omega-3 fatty acids from plant foods like nuts and seeds. The problem is the body actually has reduced conversion rate of these fatty acids, which we'll talk about more in depth in a minute. So these fats that a lot of vegetarians claim are good for them are plant-based omega-3 fatty acids, primarily alpha-linolenic acid. They come from plant-based foods, and they are also omega-3 fatty acids. But the problem is they can't be used readily by our body. They have to be converted to EPA and then to DHA because these are the forms that our body uses. But the problem is the conversion rate is very low. In fact, EPA has lower than 5 to 10% conversion rate, and DHA is even lower, 2 to 5%. Okay, so here are some of the food sources that are higher in alpha-linolenic acid. We see pumpkin seeds here, flax seeds here. These are hemp seeds, and these at the bottom are chia seeds, and we've got walnut seeds as well. We'll look at their lipid profile in a minute. So, Yes, those people are right. They do give them omega-3 fatty acids. If we look at this column here, ALA, it's alpha-linolenic acid. Chia seeds, hemp seeds, flax seeds, and walnuts, they do contain a good amount of omega-3 fatty acids. But the problem is they also have omega-6. So look at the ratio here. This is more relevant to us. So the really good ones here are flax seeds and chia seeds because the ratio is good. The 6:3 ratio is 0.32 and 0.25. And let's also have a look at the most common cooking oils. The ones highlighted in pink are the ones I'd like to draw your attention to. Well, first of all, corn oil, which is very common in a lot of households. It's very high in omega-6 fatty acids, and the ratio is very high. It's 46.07 because it has very low omega-3 fatty acid content. And then there's also and then there's try again. And then there's also soybean oil, which we know is high in omega-6. And the good one here, like we saw up in the table up there, is flaxseed oil. And then there's also one that I would like you to remember because we will be coming back to it very soon. Sunflower oil. It naturally contains a lot of omega-6 fatty acids. It has no omega-3 fatty acids. We'll move on first, but please remember sunflower oil because it will become relevant very soon. So we talked about reduced conversion. In fact, actually, one of the reasons why it's meaningless for these people to eat a lot of those foods is that the conversion rates are actually inhibited by a lot of factors. One of them is the intake of linoleic acid. What it means is if you eat a lot of linoleic acid, which is the omega-6 fatty acids, it will slow down the rate of ALA being converted into EPA and DHA because, as you can see here, they both use the same enzyme, which means they will be competing for the same enzymes. This is the rate-limiting step, which means that if you have more omega-6 in your diet, the enzyme will selectively convert linoleic acid, LA, into along this pathway rather than the omega-3 pathway. And in a lot of vegan diet, the ratio is actually 10:1, which is even worse than the oils we just saw. So this is one of the factors affecting conversion rate. And then there's also nutrient deficiencies. What does that mean? If we look at this pathway again, there are many enzymes here, and these enzymes actually are composed of various nutrients. For example, iron, selenium, zinc, calcium, magnesium. And if you have a deficiency in these nutrients, it will mean that your enzymes won't be operating at an optimal level because there simply aren't enough of these enzymes. Because if you don't have enough of these nutrients, you won't be able to produce enough enzymes. If you remember from our webinar 2 weeks ago, we talked about Extend, which is a multivitamin and multi-nutrient supplement. And it has all these nutrients that we see on the screen here. So if you suspect that you might have, deficiency in any of these nutrients, which could compromise your health and your conversion rate, please make sure that you get this Extend because it gives you a wide spectrum protection to make sure that your body is really doing its job. It's converting the omega-3, the short chain omega-3 fatty acids into the long chain ones. And then there's also another factor that affects the conversion rate, which is your health status. Diabetics and people who are obese have lower conversion rate. And then there's also genetics and environment, but we don't fully understand them because there's a lot of interactions between them. And then one very interesting fact is your gender actually affects this as well. Younger women have a higher rate because, well, we need DHA. I mean, women need DHA and EPA for their, for their gestation and for lactation as well. So naturally, they are better at converting them. And according to one study, this study here, men could not convert ALA into any EPA at all. But this might be one isolated study, but what I would like to emphasize is there are many factors, as we've seen, interacting with each other to affect your conversion rate. So this is not always a reliable source of omega-3 fatty acids. But if you insist, what can you do and how much should you eat? According to the National Institute of Health, they recommend 615 milligrams per day, including both EPA and DHA, and at least 215 from DHA. Well, let's do the maths. If the conversion rate is 2 to 5%, which means every day you will be needing at least 4.3 to 10.8 grams of alpha-linolenic acid in order to effectively and efficiently convert to the required amount of DHA that your body needs. But if we look at these two studies here, vegans and vegetarians don't eat that much ALA. Let's have a look here. Up here, it's only 1.15 grams per day. And in another study, vegans have about 0.86 grams per day and vegetarians only 0.97 grams. That's way below the 10.8 grams that we need, which basically means you really cannot rely on food if you are vegan or vegetarian and you want to optimize your health. According to this study, well, we just talked about the amount, but just eating more omega-3 won't cut it, because if you still eat a lot of omega-6, you're still compromising the conversion rate. According to this study, the optimum intake is in the ratio 1:1. So 6 to 3 ratio is 1:1. And then you will have the best conversion rate compared with, let's see, 4.1, 4:1 or 9:1. But it's very, very difficult to achieve this ratio, especially for vegans. As we've seen, a lot of plant foods have a lot of omega-6 fatty acids, which means that you will have to eat a lot of pure omega-3 fatty acids in order to balance this ratio. But you simply can't find that many pure omega-3 fatty acids foods in nature. That means there has to be another way. And that way is, well, if you can't get enough from food alone, you will have to think about supplementing. A lot of the products on the market actually only have either EPA or DHA, and we will see whether either one is enough. So let's have a look at this one first. Is EPA alone enough? Because people think that, well, since DHA is the next step of the conversion pathway, if I supplement a lot of EPA, well, it makes sense that I will naturally have more DHA. According to this study, actually, the answer is no. So they ran this research with 3 different supplement oils being supplemented, ALA, EPA, and DHA. And it turns out when you supplement with EPA, you don't get more DHA. DHA should be the bar in the middle. And you only get more DHA when you supplement with DHA, which also means, well, you really do need both. Then what about DHA? Do we really need DHA? Okay, according to this, well, actually the same study, let's look at the distribution of DHA in our body. Retina, your eyes, the one on the bottom left corner is DHA. your eyes, sperms, cerebral cortex, your brain, red blood cells, your spleen, liver, muscle, heart. So these are all metabolically active tissues in our body, and they all have a high content of DHA compared with, ALA or EPA. So let's try to put it into perspective. If it's so widespread in your body, well, wouldn't you think that our body really needs it? Because it's everywhere. It's just like protein, right? A lot of people place a lot of emphasis on protein because they think that we're essentially made up of protein. Well, by the same token, if all our organs or tissues have DHA, doesn't it make sense for us to have more DHA? Because it's everywhere in our body and we certainly need it. So what are the consequences if you don't have enough DHA and EPA? Well, first of all, you might have cardiovascular risks. According to the American Heart Association, they recommend we eat oily fish at least twice a week. But wait a minute, I remember that vegetarians and vegans actually have a lower risk of cardiovascular diseases. Isn't that true? You are right. According to this study, vegans and vegetarians actually have a 24% lower mortality rate. So does that mean they're healthier? Wait a minute, not so fast, because it only tells you they have a lower mortality rate. It does not tell you whether they are living a quality life, because as we saw earlier, their 6:3 ratio is pretty bad. And 6:3 ratio is a very good predictor of how well you are living your life. So here we're really talking about existing and living. Just because you have a lower mortality rate does not mean you have a good life, or you have a healthy life, or you have a pain-free life. So think about it. You do not want to just exist. You want to live your life. You want to live a radiant life. I remember a few years ago, I went to an aquarium and then I was looking at a tank there. There were lots of jellyfish. And I was thinking, what's the life purpose of jellyfish? And what was my purpose? Because I felt like every day I woke up and then I went to work and then I came home and then I went to sleep again. And then I was looping, every day, day after day. And then at the weekend, I would have no energy and I would just stay at home. And I felt like I was exactly like those jellyfish. But tonight is not the time for us to get philosophical. I'm just giving you an example to tell you that just one factor or one biomarker does not tell you that, just because you have a lower mortality rate doesn't mean that you're healthier. Apart from cardiovascular diseases, there are also neurodevelopmental risks. This study actually recruited 341 pregnant ladies, and starting from the 18th week of pregnancy, they started taking DHA and EPA. And then after they'd given birth, we saw that we found the same children. They found the same children from those pregnant women. 84 of them turned up. And it turns out that if a pregnant woman supplements with DHA and EPA in the second half of their pregnancy, their baby actually has a higher IQ, as we see in this study. They were tested at 4 years of age, and they had higher IQ in all four tests here. So it tells you, the study says that supplementation significantly improved mental processing score. Also, we found from this study that infants who were breastfed by vegan mothers actually had less than 30% of the EPA and DHA of their omnivorous counterparts. So infants who were breastfed by omnivores had 6.2% DHA in their red blood cells, but the vegan ones only had 1.9%. And what does that mean? What are the implications? This study looked at babies who were 3 months old, and a 3-month-old baby is rapidly developing. The whole body, the brain, neurodevelopment is very important. So at this stage, they are developing the motor skills, their senses and emotions. And if you're not giving them the nutrients that they need in order to develop well, then you're actually compromising the health and compromising the future as well. So, which is why I'd like to introduce you to this amazing product, Balance Oil, vegan Balance Oil. This is the oil that I'm taking right now. And what's so special about it is it's not just any algal oil, because it's actually quite popular these days. It has a very smart and unique formula. So the algal oil component comes from microalgae, Schistochytrin sp. And there's also, like Balance Oil, regular, we have olive oil from Spanish pre-harvest picual olives. And there's also another ingredient here, which is the echium seed oil, which we'll talk about very soon. So the olives here, these are actually picual olives, and then the microalgae, and then echium seeds. So if you remember from, we saw this pathway already. One of the strengths of this formula is that it has SDA from echium. SDA is stearidonic acid. It's here in this chart on the left. What it means is, do you remember this enzyme? It's this omega-3 and 6 actually compete for this enzyme. But if we have SDA, which actually skips one step, it will skip the rate limiting step. And that means we don't have to rely on the abundance of this enzyme. And we're already skipping one step ahead, which makes it easier for us to convert this acid into EPA and DHA. Okay, now I'd like to give you some market information. So I looked at a very well-known health food website. I'm not going to tell you which one. And I pulled out the 3 top-selling vegan omega-3 oils. And then here are the facts. So the number 1 best-selling one has DHA and EPA, but only 270 mg and 135 mg. And this is actually from the description. It says algal oil, which contains high oleic sunflower oil. Do you remember? I asked you to remember sunflower oil. It is primarily omega-6 fatty acids, but then it says high oleic. High oleic. Oleic is a omega-9 fatty acids. So why is that? Why do they have sunflower oil in what they call algal oil? Not only that, well, it's number 1 best-selling, but it has cornstarch in it. And a lot of corn on the market, sweet corns, are actually GMO products. Well, we don't know for sure whether this one is GMO or not, but well, if it has cornstarch, it definitely is not keto-friendly. The number 2 best-selling one only has DHA. It does not have EPA, and it tells us that it's from algae, but it also has starch, vegetable starch. The number 3 best-selling ones has DHA and EPA, but then the amount is not. Well, I mean, the amount is higher than the first one, but then it's still not quite enough. And it also has cornstarch and the same ingredient, high oleic sunflower oil. Well, it turns out that I did a little digging online, and I read some research article. It turns out sunflower oil, well, if it has high oleic acid, it's a GMO product. So if you are looking for a vegan DHA, you really, really need to make sure that it says it's an algal or a pure algal DHA or EPA product, because just because it says it's vegan doesn't necessarily mean that it's GMO free or it's good for you. So please take note of this. And there's some good news, great news actually, I'd like to share with you. I just heard it from Rob today, which is vegan balanced oil is now fully certified with the Vegan Society, and it's recommended by them as the #1 vegan omega-3 oil in this category. So, well, I mean, it really says a lot about the quality of the products. So congratulations to Zinzino, and congratulations to us who are lucky to get this product. So now let's talk about the effectiveness. Now that we know we need to get EPA and DHA, okay, so what about the efficacy of algal oil? Is it as effective? According to this study, it's actually a review. They did they studied 4 trials who involved vegetarians, and they at least had 6 months of vegetarianism. They followed at least 6 months a vegetarian diet. And they found that supplementing with algal oil significantly increased the DHA. And this one is even more relevant to us. If you remember our balance test, it tells you your omega-3 index, and the recommended amount is 8%. And in this randomized trial, they recruited 104 vegetarians, and they supplemented 0.94 grams of algal oil every day for 8 weeks, and 69% of them exceeded the 8%. You see here, 8.4% after just 8 weeks. So yeah, it really proves that supplementation confers benefits for you for this ratio and has anti-inflammatory effects. And let's talk more about the benefits of algal oil. In this study, they looked at, again, pregnant women and their babies. They found that algal oil improved infant psychomotor development. So there were 114 mothers who supplemented 200 mg per day for 4 months after the delivery. And then they looked at these infants, 90 of them, when they were 30 months old, and they found that they had significantly improved psychomotor development index. And what does that measure? It measures your cognitive ability, your language, your motor skills, your social emotional skills, and also your adaptive skills, which include communication, self-control, and following rules. So if you look at this group, algal group, compared with the control, it is a significant increase. So yeah, it tells you that it helps your brain, it helps your development very much. Another study, actually, from the same group of children when they were 5 years old. This time they only had 55 of them. And they found that they had better sustained attention compared with the placebo. What that means, that actually measures how well they can hold their attention. And together with the psychomotor development index we saw on the last page, these are actually important factors for success in life, because if you can hold your attention, if you have good communication, if you have good language skills, and if you can have self-control, well, I'm sure all of you remember the very famous marshmallow experiment, which tests whether children are able to exercise self-control. And it turns out children who are better at self-control go on to become more successful in life. So really, these are factors. These are important factors for how successful you can be in life. And these come from DHA and EPA, algal oil. Okay, let's talk about the other star ingredient in this formula, the ekium oil. Since it's quite new to most of you and to me as well, ekium oil actually contains 33% alpha-linolenic acid, the plant-based omega-3 we talked about, and then it also contains 12.5% SDA. And in this study, they took 11 subjects who each took 15 grams of ekium oil every day for 4 weeks. And they found that the blood triglycerides level decreased by 21% and the EPA increased, which means that what they were taking actually translated into EPA. If you remember that pathway, SDA is here, which means that if you supplement with ekium, it actually goes along that pathway and become EPA. Sorry. Yes. So those are the two most prominent benefits from taking ekium oil from this study. And the authors of this, the researchers actually said, these oils appear to possess hypotriglyceridemic, which means lowering effect, properties typically associated with fish oils. You see, this is a plant oil, but it has benefits from fish oils, which is why we have it in vegan balanced oil. You know, everything, every single ingredient is here for a reason. There is no starch, there is no high oleic sunflower oil. It's real, it really is the real stuff. It has vegan algal oil, it has olive oil, it has ekium oil, and they are all there for a reason. They're not just there as binders or a filler. And finally, I would like to share with you this study that combines algal oil and olive oil. There aren't a lot of such studies available, but I managed to find one. And this one was done on rats. And they found that when rats were supplemented with both algal oil and olive oil, they had three groups, especially the old groups. Old groups, 24 months old rats. The young group was 3 months old rats. So they found that when the old rats were supplemented with both algal oil and olive oil, a lot of the age-specific, degenerative markers or cardio-metabolic markers were decreased. For example, let's see here, insulin level, it dropped to a level comparable to a young rat. And this one is even more remarkable. Interleukin-6, which is an inflammatory marker. Old rat had 188, but the ones that had algal and olive oil dropped to below the young group. So it really is a very prominent product. And I really look forward to seeing more research done, on both algal and olive oil in the future. So this is the end of my sharing tonight, and it also marks the end of the season. So thank you very much once again. Thank you, Rob. Thank you, Peter, for inviting me to do this series with you all. And thank you for tuning in tonight and the past few weeks. Thank you very much. I look forward to seeing you again, to sharing more great information with you again. Thank you very much.